Hi, fifth grade. This is our last video for this week. Got something a little different that we're going to do in this lesson. I think you have probably all heard of me talk about the bat release that they do in Omaha. Every year they take all of the bats that they have caught through the winter and they release them at the same time. Normally this is done down by the Joslin Art Museum, but because we are all being asked to stay at home right now, they did it on Facebook Live. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. It is a really neat experience, so if you can get out there next year to see it, keep an eye out on the Nebraska Wildlife Refuge page or website, and they announce it. They don't usually give a lot of notice. In fact, I found out about this one that morning because they have to consider what the temperatures are like so that it will be warm enough for the bats. They also have to think about the food that the bats eat and that there will be enough food for them. And so a lot of things they have to consider before they can release them. So it's usually a pretty short time between when they announce it and when they release them. So I'm going to show you some of the video from that.
So big brown bats weigh, it depends a little bit on whether they're male or female and what time of year it is. When they're hibernating, they weigh a lot more, right? So they weigh anywhere generally when they're healthy between 14 and 23 or 4 grams when they're hibernating. But in the spring and summer, I would say a healthy weight is 14 to 19 grams for big brown bats, and the females are bigger than the males. Yep, somebody just asked what species are we releasing because they missed it. It's big brown bats, and if you're just tuning in, you're at Bat Release 2020, Nebraska Wildlife Rehab's annual bat release virtual version this year, and hopefully the only virtual version we ever have to do. Okay, so I'm going to flip this around again, and I'm going to try to get close in to see some of the bats, and I'm going to let Ellie open this cage. Now, the bats were really, really rowdy earlier, and now they're all quiet. They're being all chill. These are females. So if you guys want to see, this is a funny looking thing. The bats are all hiding on the screen here behind the towel. So they're hanging out. So actually some of our staff and volunteers might have to encourage them. Some of them are hanging out right here. And they're pretty cute. But I'm going to get out of the way so they can do what they want to do tonight, which is fly away. So I'm going to step back, and then maybe Ellie and Heather, you guys might have to encourage them, or Amy, somebody. You might have to just do a hand release, because they've all decided to go back to sleep. So for you guys, I'm going to do the best that I can to Facebook Live this. I'm gonna stay in vertical orientation. But Alex is also here doing video and photographs, so we'll have a lot more that we'll post later on. I don't know. See, I'm not going to be fast enough to follow the bats, I don't think. So we're going to watch them from here. Otherwise, the video won't follow them. Are you guys seeing them? I can see them. One just flew right by me. Somebody's asking, what does white nose fungus look like? When it is apparent, when you can actually see it, it actually just looks like white fuzz on their face or other parts of their body. It did get its name from its appearance on bats' noses. It looks like they have like spray foam or something on their noses. But sometimes bats don't show any visible signs of the fungus. And we can only tell that they have the fungus either from looking at them under a black light or from doing an actual swab test. They can also have damage to their wings, their wing membranes from white nose syndrome. So there's a lot of things that biologists and veterinarians and wildlife rehabilitators look for when they're looking for a bat with possible white nose syndrome. So in Nebraska, we record 13 species of bats. They are all, we consider them native because they come here themselves, but one, the Mexican free-tailed, is not here very frequently. There are only a few recorded cases of it in the state of Nebraska over the last 100 years. Doesn't mean there aren't more, but those are the ones that we've seen. Of those bats, 9 of our 13 species in Nebraska are considered at risk, and one is a federally threatened species, the northern long-eared myotis. Someone is at Patrick. Hi, Pat. Hi, Pat. Everybody say hi to Pat. What's the average age of these bats? This varies greatly, and it's a great question. A lot of them are first years. They have a tendency to get themselves into trouble. But bats can live up to 30 years. So a lot of them I would consider older bats. They could be 8 to 10 years. Sometimes in rehab, we get older bats that are suffering from actually age-related illness. A lot of times those bats aren't able to be released back into the wild, but once they hit a certain age, it'd be difficult for us to actually estimate how old they are in rehab. Oof, they just all fell down. Now they're going to start coming out faster. Let's see. What other questions do you guys have? That's a great question. One of the questions that we answer every year for people, sometimes people are like, they don't want the bats released near their house because they don't want more bats in and around their houses. But what we know is that big brown bats and other bat species actually travel back to their home roosts. So if these bats came from central Omaha, then they will go back to central Omaha. If they came from Fremont, they'll go back to Fremont. And we adjust a lot of our protocols to adjust for that. So if we have bats that come from Lincoln or somewhere else in the state of Nebraska, we don't release them in Omaha. We release them back where they came from so that they don't have so far to travel. But we generally expect them to go back to their home roost and not to stick around for too long. Now, that being said, that's why we choose the Joslin every year. One, they're an amazing partner, and we miss you guys. Amy, I don't know if you're watching, but yes. Okay, somebody is asking if we can show one to the, actually, my niece Stella is asking if we can show one to the camera. So we're going to do that. But one of the reasons why we release at the Joslin in Omaha is so that the bats have a short route home. In this case, we are not exactly in Omaha, but we are close enough that these bats are going to have a short route home. Ellie's holding one up there, making some noise. He wants to leave. We're doing girls right now. In the winter, when we hibernate our bats, they're separated male and female. And hi, Amy. If anybody wants to know why, it's because the males bother the females in hibernation. So we separate them because the males cannot behave themselves. Yes. Okay, good question. So the bats that fall on the ground, sometimes they just make a miscalculation, and we give them another chance to fly. If they do not fly on their second chance, we take them back and we care for them until they are able to fly again. Sometimes at the Joslin, it gets pretty chaotic and there are a lot of people out there. And so sometimes bats just don't want to fly on that night because it's too noisy or there's too many people. And then when we give them a chance to fly later, they do okay. Tonight I don't expect a lot of that to happen because it's just a lot quieter out here. Let's see. I'm going to take a peek in here again. These guys are realizing that all their friends are leaving, so they are getting ready. This might be closer up to the bats than you guys normally get to see at bat release. Hi, Hartleys. I saw the Hartleys are watching. Oh, did somebody ask about biting? Is that what happened? So, of course, like any wild animal, bats can definitely bite. And that's why we wear gloves and we are careful with them. However, like we say with all wildlife, if you do not bother it and harm it, it's not going to unprovokedly bite you. So what we always say to people is if you are not trained and if you are not licensed, please do not handle wildlife. Call the experts if you need assistance. If you are in the Omaha area right now, then you call Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. You can also call the Nebraska Humane Society. They're our great partner. If you're in another part of the country, you've got to have a local wildlife rehabilitator or a local animal control that can help you. So always keep those numbers handy because you never know when you're going to come across an injured wild animal needing help. bet. Hi, Liz. Okay, so there are lots of reasons that bats could be endangered in North America and across the world. In North America right now, we are focused on white nose syndrome, which is a fungal infection infecting bats and actually decimating large numbers of bat populations, especially particular species of bats. Also, there are some issues with wind turbines and bat fatalities, and so scientists and energy experts are working on modifying wind turbines to make them safer for not only bats, but also birds and raptors and other animals. And then pesticide use also affects our bat populations in a couple of ways. One, it reduces the number of insects available for them, but it also, bats can be poisoned by pesticides, and they get them off the insects that they're eating. And so that has an issue, that causes issues with bats. Also, simple habitat destruction. Like all wildlife, they need habitat to survive. When we destroy the places that they live, their numbers decline. There are other things across the world, other diseases that might that bats have issues with. And also, bats are killed for traditional medicine and for food in other countries. And the unregulated killing of bats for those purposes also puts bat numbers in decline. Laura Connolly, am I missing something? I got them all? Okay. Oh, big brown bats like moths and beetles. Yeah. So moths and beetles. So they are not the ones that are necessarily eating large numbers of mosquitoes. But there are lots of different species of bats in Nebraska, and the other ones do, and they will eat mosquitoes, but that's not their primary diet. They're a little bit of a larger bat. Okay. Hey, so I'm going to switch this over. I'm going to let our educator, Laura Connolly, explain agricultural pests in bats. Whoops, hold on. I just moved it to me. Sorry, guys. I can't do technology. Okay.
So big brown bats consume a lot of agricultural pests, and so things that farmers slowly use in corn crops, and so their farmers spread them and break them around.
Especially in Nebraska.
Especially in Nebraska.
Awesome.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead back to our PowerPoint. Hopefully you were able to see that really well. And if you get a chance, it is really a neat experience to see those bats. This year they released about 400 bats, so I don't know if you noticed all of the containers that were under the table that they were working at. Those were all full of bats, and then there was another large one like the one on the table that was full of bats. They explained that the reason they were in different containers is because if some of them were injured, they might have been kept in a smaller group, or if it looked like one was a mother and a baby or a younger child bat of that mother, they would keep them in their own container. But what I want you to think of after watching that video is in your science notebook, write down how did you see interactions between the Earth's spheres in the video of the bat release. So if you need to go back and watch that, go back and watch it, but I want you to see if you can come up with 4 interactions that include each of the different spheres. So an interaction that has to do with the geosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere. And all of those were evident in that video, so it should be pretty easy for you to come up with. Share your work if you would like to. I'd love to hear your thoughts, even if you want to just tell me what you thought about the video of the bat release. I'd love to hear about it. And I will be sending you more videos for next week.